All right, everyone, last but not least. I'm Caroline McGregor, and I usually prefer to be behind the scenes, but what a privilege to be here with all of you today. I coordinate the US C3E program. I also coordinate the International C3E initiative for the DOE's Office of Policy and International Affairs. A few of you here in this room were around in July 2010 for the launch of C3E. So that's Christina Johnson for sure, Minister Peters, maybe a few others. This was back in the day when we were deciding whether it was C3E or CE3, maybe CE cubed. Anyway, so C3E, here we are. Anyway, I imagine I speak for all of us, and I say it's really amazing how far we've come. Truly, truly amazing. And our partnership with the MIT Energy Initiative is a tremendous part of that, tremendous part of bringing the ambassadors, the awards, and this great symposium to life. And so let me just recognize Melanie Kenderdine and her great team for all that they've done to help make our vision a reality. So it's a cliche, but in this instance, it rings very true that we simply wouldn't be here today without them. Now, we would also not be here today without the leadership of David Sandalow, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce him to you today. He is the Assistant Secretary for Policy and International Affairs at the Department of Energy. He is also currently our Acting Undersecretary. And alongside Secretary 2, he was the driving force behind our launch of the Clean Energy Ministerial with 23 major economy governments. He is also the one who first asked, how can we create more Christina Johnsons? I think he asked this question of Christina. This is to say, more women who are leading the way on energy, leading on energy technology development, leading energy companies, leading energy policy. And it was from David's question that C3E was born. So he's been a champion of this initiative from the beginning, and it's worth noting, for those of you who read the recent piece in The Atlantic by Anne-Marie Slaughter on giving equal weight to work and family. He's the father of 3, and I believe one of his daughters is here with us today. So, David, thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Carolyn, and not really for that introduction, but for all the tremendous work you've done on this initiative and on this conference. Thank you so much. Big, big hand for Carolyn. And also for Melanie, and for the whole team. I go to a lot of conferences, and I go actually to a number of good conferences, but I can't remember a conference that I've walked into, and within a half an hour of being here, somebody said to me, this is the best conference I've ever been to. And then it's just been a constant wave of enthusiasm ever since I arrived. It's really tremendous how energized people are by this, so thank you. And I know something this good doesn't happen without the hard work of a lot of people really pushing to make it happen, so just a big hand for everybody. Thank you. That said, it's the end of the day. It's been a long day, and I stand between you and the reception, so I am not going to give really long remarks. But since it's the end of the day, let me start with a little audience participation here. And I think, looking out on the crowd out there, I think at least half of you are 30-something or older. So let me ask this: how many of you how many people have cell phones today? One or more cell phones? And of those who were 30-something or older, how many believe you had cell phones 20 years ago in 1992? 1, I see. 2, maybe think that. So how many people had, I have, by the way, on that, I was working as a U.S. government official in 1995 at a big international conference, I remember quite well, as a climate negotiator. And we needed to call back to the White House for instructions in 1995, but nobody in the U.S. government in 1995 had been issued cell phones. And so I remember borrowing a cell phone from a government lobbyist, because only the government lobbyists had cell phones at the time. And we called back to the White House and got instructions. I was fairly confident they weren't listening to our call through their phone. But, so how many people have laptop computers with access to the internet today? Think back 20 years, how many of you had laptop computers with access to the internet in 1992? Even here at MIT, not many. And so how many people have ever driven around with a little black box that speaks to you, usually in a female voice, and says, turn left in 5 miles, turn right in 50 feet? I learned, by the way, here we call it GPS. In England, they call it a sat-nav device. And how many people 20 years ago even had the notion of a little black box that would locate you precisely within 50 feet anywhere on planet Earth? So, okay, so how many of you plugged in your car last time you drove home? And how many have photovoltaic cells on your roofs? Couple. Okay, so here we're in MIT at an energy conference, just to put people on the spot. How many of you energy experts believe you know the cost to run your refrigerator on electricity for a year plus or minus $25? Okay, so in this crowd, like maybe 10 people raised their hand. So I predict that in 20 years, if I ask the last three questions I just asked about plugging in your cars, about PVs on your roofs, about knowing the cost in electricity of a basic household appliance, that a room like this, the show of hands would be substantially different. But that result is not guaranteed. It depends upon a lot of things. So we have the potential to change the world, but it will really depend upon the people in this room, people watching on webcast, people in other rooms around the world. And one of the core reasons that I'm so enthusiastic about this initiative and everything it stands for is that for the clean energy revolution to succeed, we need all of humanity, not half of humanity, in order to make it work. There's no resource that's more important than human capital. We need resources in this clean energy revolution, and often we focus on financial resources and how you mobilize financial capital. But human capital is probably the most important resource. And when it comes to jobs in clean energy, we have to make sure that the doors are open to everybody. And actually, I think we actually have to do more than make sure the doors are open to everybody. We need to make sure that we nurture talent, that we applaud enthusiasm, that we reward results. And that is what this initiative is all about. And our work on clean energy, it has a lot to do with science, technology, engineering, and math. And there the data is clear. I just heard some discussion of it. But it's interesting, young girls, I suspect this point has been made already today, but young girls outperform young boys on math and science tests. But by the time they become teenagers, that starts to change. And by college, there's a large gap. And on an ongoing basis, as someone just said here, only about 25% of the STEM jobs are held by women. And also, a really key point, you just made a key point, which is that clean energy jobs are not just STEM jobs. Clean energy jobs are also jobs held by policy experts, by organizers, mobilizers, writers, people of all kinds of diverse backgrounds. And C3E is founded on the belief that role models and mentors can make a difference across all of these domains. I know people I've had the privilege to work with who have spoken here today who are real heroes of mine include Depu Peters, Minister of Energy from South Africa, who I just had the privilege of meeting with, and who's just quite an extraordinary person. Kathleen McGinty, who was my boss a number of years ago, who is just an amazing leader in this issue. Christina Johnson, who is a colleague at DOE, and is one of the more amazing people I've had the privilege of working with. So encouraging people to follow in their footpaths, I think, is as important as anything we're doing. I would say, make no mistake about it, women face barriers in this profession as in all others. They're both subtle and they're overt. There's this classic New Yorker cartoon, which, the conference room with 15 men and 1 woman, and the caption is, "That's a very interesting point, Ms. Jones. Maybe one of the men in the room would like to make it." And I think, I suspect that's an experience that a number of you have had. Actually, my wife and I were laughing about kind of a related point recently. We took a long car trip, and our GPS device, you can program it actually to be male or female voices, and you can also program it in different accents. It'll speak to you as an Australian man or an Australian woman, and an English man or British man or British woman. And so we were doing the man's voice. We programmed in a man's voice, and my wife said, "Oh, he sounds so authoritative and confident." And then we programmed a woman's voice, and she said, "Oh, she sounds so shrill and pushy." And I think that type of challenge is out there for women in the workplace. It's one of the reasons that we need mentors, we need awareness, and we need programs like C3E. I think we're starting to overcome some of these barriers. I was particularly struck a little bit more than a year ago. Some of you might have read this. The U.S. negotiating team with the Russians on nuclear weapons, not exactly meaningless stuff, very important stuff. It was led by an old colleague of mine, Rose Gadamuller, woman who's really been a leader in this area for a long time. Her deputy was Marcy Rice. The 2 top U.S. scientists were female. The woman helping to close the deal, the undersecretary, was Ellen Tauscher, and of course they all reported to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So the entire U.S. negotiating team, from the deputy level, deputy assistant secretary level and above, were women closing that deal. But make no mistake, I mean, the barriers persist, and that's one of the reasons that President Obama has worked hard on this. He has said the goal is to make sure there's no limit on how big women can dream or how high they can reach. In March 2009, within less than 2 months after taking office, he signed an executive order creating the White House Council on Women and Girls, which focuses every federal department on this. And at the Department of Energy, by the way, our programs include not just the C3E program, which we're here talking about, but a number of other programs also. Argonne Laboratory hosts an annual Science Careers in Search of Women conference, which some of you may have participated in. It works with young women from the Chicago area high schools on science education. And we have several internship programs geared towards minorities, women in STEM in particular. I want to mention just two other things quickly before closing. One of them, which I know has been discussed here, is the huge importance of energy access issues to women around the world. More than 1.2 billion people live without access to basic electricity services, women disproportionately among them, and women often bear the brunt of energy collection in poor countries. And when we're talking about women's role in energy, I believe we should be talking about not just CEOs and careers in STEM education in rich countries, but energy access in rural women around the world. There's a tremendous program, by the way, launched by the Secretary General of the United Nations called Sustainable Energy for All, which it really focuses the world's attention on that issue. And it's something that the Secretary General was talking about in New York at the big UNGA meetings last week, and is extremely important. And then I want to talk about just a moment about the Clean Energy Ministerial, which Caroline mentioned. It's a program that was launched by my boss, Energy Secretary Stephen Chu. And by the way, just say a word about him, because it's been one of the great delights for me for the past couple of years, has been working for a Nobel Prize winner in physics, who is, I came to the Department of Energy with him. I wasn't there before, but I felt somewhat bad, particularly that first year when we had budget hearings and some people were defending their budgets to a Nobel Prize winner who was more expert in what they were working on than they would be. It was an experience I think they weren't used to. But he, when we came into the building, into office, he asked me whether we could host a meeting with other countries focusing on clean energy, with other energy ministers. And it's interesting, that had never been done before. When energy ministers got together, they typically talked about oil and gas issues. And so we did that, and the first Clean Energy Ministerial was held in Washington in 2010. That's when we launched this program, the C3E program. The second was in the United Arab Emirates in 2011, and the Emiratis picked up this program with gusto and had a series of tremendous workshops and meetings on this topic. The third was in England, and the fourth is going to be in New Delhi in spring of 2013. The reason I couldn't be here this morning was because the Indian leadership in energy is in Washington today, meeting with Secretary Chu and others, and I met with them this morning before I flew up here, and we talked about the fourth Clean Energy Ministerial. They're very excited about it. They're very interested in this program and other programs and ways to push it forward. So looking back, we looked back 20 years, let's look forward 20 years. As Caroline mentioned, I'm a father. Maybe in 20 years I'll be a grandfather. And I predict that one of my granddaughters will look at one of my daughters someday and say, "What, you mean you couldn't plug in cars back when you were young? That is really weird." Thanks very much. Congratulations on a terrific conference.
Thanks so much, David. The organizers and the sponsors and the speakers and the moderators have all received a lot of accolades today, and I want to thank all of you. You've been a tremendous, tremendous group of people, and so let's applaud for ourselves. And then I just want to say two more things. We will be announcing the winner of the poster contest out at the cocktail party. And I would close by saying, now that we are almost done, I can stop the deliberations I've had in my head over the course of the day. And they were, it's the worst, it's the best, it's the worst, it's the best, it's the worst. And I'm going to say now that it's all over with, I have the best job. Okay. Thank you all.